All right, everyone. I am joined by, I keep saying this week after week, it feels like, but I am joined by what is, at least in my estimation, one of my most anticipated guests to date on the entire show. She's an absolute rock star. You just heard her bio, so we're going to get straight into it. I'm joined today by Kaeli Lindholm from KLC Consultants, or Consulting rather. Thank you for joining. How in the world are you?
Hi, Austin. Thanks so much for that wonderful intro. I am doing well. I'm tuning in from Southern California and we finally have sun shining, so I can't complain.
Right on. Very cool. Well, I will trade the rain and turmoil in Denver here for your sun any day of the week. But that aside, anywho, well, hey, so you have a very interesting backstory. Now, I don't want to devote the entire show to that, but I think it'd be very helpful to orient the listeners on your backstory. So given that you have, there's a ton that we could talk through, maybe briefly tell us the moment or the story behind your departure from corporate America into the consultant's life, and maybe a bit about the problem that you saw in aesthetics that you wanted to work on that led you to do the work that you do today.
Yeah, sure. Gosh, I feel old when I think about the stories that I have and the timeline, but I am a strategic growth advisor for women in aesthetics and wellness who disrupt the status quo. And I am on a mission to help 100 intentional and inspiring women cross the next $1 million milestone in their business this year. And I think that what's important about that and what you'll sort of hear unravel through my story is, helping women stand out and be different and unique. And when I say disrupt the status quo, I think that that is something that's near and dear to my heart because of where I came from. And I found being in the corporate world, I was in sales. I worked originally for Bayer Healthcare, and I was in sales for them in the diabetes industry, actually. And I spent just about 6 years with them and then was recruited into, I didn't actually even know what aesthetics was. I got a call from someone who, had heard about me through, a contact, through my network and said, hey, would you be interested in coming over to the cool side where people actually pay cash for services and you're not dealing with insurance-based products? And I was like, yes, sign me up. That sounds amazing. And I started in sales, selling skincare and then lasers. And then I became a sales director for an aesthetic medical device company. And I felt like, I loved the spirit of building a team and sales and the connection that I had with my clients. I felt like as I continued to climb the corporate ladder, there were less and less avenues for me to be creative and to really expand and to take an entrepreneurial spirit that I had and apply it, within the business. And that showed up in ways like I was being told, make sure you say it a certain way or don't approach. I would have sort of creative ideas of how to implement a new marketing strategy or something like that. And no, it's not quite PC enough or, but we've done it this way for a long time. So we'll continue to do it this way. And then, about my last quarter of working in corporate, I had 3 clients buy a body contouring device actually from me and said to me, we want to do business with you with your company because we'll have access to you. And I thought, well, this doesn't make a lot of sense. You guys all spent like hundreds of thousands of dollars. I cashed in, a few thousand for my commission and we're all just trying to do business together. Let's do it on our own, and on our own way. And so, the story goes on that I launched KLC Consulting and I worked actually with some device manufacturers to build go-to-market strategy for some new technologies that were coming out. And I met a young plastic surgeon in that process who asked me to step in and become a managing director and help him build his business. He wanted to launch a wellness division. He wanted to build a non-surgical division. And so I sort of took a different, seat at the table where I had been, the sales rep and the manager selling technology. And now I was actually running the practice. And so I sort of saw the industry and my approach to helping them build their businesses with a new lens. And I realized that there were a lot of gaps coming from corporate America, building teams within certain structures that had already been built, to a small business, be it a medical practice for that, where the business owner is also the operator. And by the way, went to school to learn how to take care of people, not to build a business, not to learn how to lead and build a team. And so there was an opportunity that I saw. And I think, there was the one side of it where I wanted to get out of corporate myself and build my own, just start my own entrepreneurial journey. But then there was the other sort of gap that, I saw working with and in practice, that there weren't the right kinds of resources and tools for these business owners to learn the basic fundamentals around building their business, and there was a lot of information by companies that weren't producing great content like yours, like you have this podcast for them, but really just kind of pigeonholing these doctors into you use our injectables or fillers, or you use our products and your business is going to be successful. Follow this template. And that's where I started seeing this sort of Me Too branding and Me Too marketing happening. And I wanted to say to these doctors, let's not sacrifice your creative agency, but let's embrace it and highlight it and put you on a pedestal so you can be different. You can build the business that you want to, business of your dreams. And that's sort of what has led me to where we are today with my leadership academy and the work that I do with our clients in aesthetics and wellness.
As I hear you talking, I can't help but think you are the, let's say, a force to be reckoned with when it comes to boilerplate busting. This idea of, hey, we've been doing this way for 1,000 years. And that's exactly why it's probably wrong. Yeah. We need to disrupt the status quo. So this is actually a great setup, because there's two topics or categories of topics that I'd like to focus on today. Okay, cool. Listeners, one of the challenges with bringing on a guest like Kaeli is the fact that there are, 10,000 different topics we could spend our lives on, writing dissertations on, academically and otherwise. But let's zero in on two. I think these are related and deeply intertwined. So the first is mindset. And I know this, most people that hear the term mindset, the first thing they think of is Tony Robbins. And maybe they stop there and they write it up and say, I don't need mindset, I need revenue. Wow. Yeah, they're totally mutually exclusive. Wrong. And the second, and that'll be the setup to the second where we'll spend most of our time today, is brand strategy, or maybe a different way of thinking of it is brand strategy is a bit of a proxy for attention. I don't want to say harvesting, attention capture and retention, so that you can scale. And they're deeply, deeply intertwined. So I think to get the conversation moving that direction, I'd like to talk about your one of the five rather, core business milestones of, I believe it's of your POP program, the Practice Optimization Principle. Mm-hmm. And what I found interesting, and this is actually what spurred this line of thinking for me, is that you chose, I'm assuming very, very intentionally, number one, which is the idea of designing your $1 million confidence. So can you unpack what you mean by that when you say and speak about this notion of designing your $1 million confidence?
Yeah. Wow. You really did your homework. I am impressed. Yeah. I love that those are the topics that you picked, because while I'm not in the full blown woo camp, like we're not going to go meditate, or manifest your way to success. 80% of your business success is determined by your mind, determined by the way that you approach your business, the journey that you take yourself on through the challenges that come up, how you stay convicted to the vision that you have, who you let come into your ecosystem. And so the first milestone that we teach in my academy, this wasn't by accident. I actually built this not in a vacuum. I built this in real life, hands-on, working with clients, this curriculum, taking a group of ambitious and really motivated and clear physicians and practitioners through this sort of journey of growing their business for a year, right? And then developed a curriculum that was going to help them achieve success in a more of a way that had a framework. And I think there isn't really a cookie cutter way to build your business, but there are certain milestones that I have found need to achieve. And those are consistent for every business owner. And I think when you approach your business that way, like, there is no business in a box. I get to build the business I want, but there are these core milestones that I know if I hit this one, then I can move on to the next one, right? And I approach this. So kind of approaching it that way really just helps you avoid the landmines or the pitfalls that can happen when you're out there. You know, they say success leaves clues. And I think it's just learning from other people's journey and applying those principles, you know, from a high level, right? So less about the tactics and more about the mindset around how you lead yourself in your business. So your $1 million business confidence is really what it sounds like. It's the confidence in yourself to make decisions when there isn't a right answer. And there's actually a way that you can train yourself to do this. And sometimes it just starts with taking small steps. Believe it or not, when clients come to work with me, sometimes they're just terrified to go on Instagram Live or to make a video or even just to get their message out there. And you can't, if you're afraid, like you interviewed Lisa, you know, and she's like bold and brazen and she'll speak her mind. But imagine somebody who has these ideas and has these feelings inside of them, but then doesn't feel confident in their ability to articulate that or showcase that to the world. It's going to be really challenging for you to grow your business, right? You talk about branding, brand yourself or market yourself and get yourself out there. If you don't have the confidence to go out with your work, with that convicted feeling that you have inside of you, expose yourself, and then to build a team and to manage and lead that team so that they are part of the ecosystem that you want to build. I recorded a podcast on this on my podcast, but there's an analogy that I use about if your ecosystem was a pool, like literally, I don't know if you have a swimming pool, but think of your swimming pool, right? Imagine that your business was a pool in your life and you could only have 10 people come in and you had to pick who those 10 people were, right? How would you approach your business and life differently if you could only have 10 people there with you? Right? You wouldn't let someone come in and pee in your pool. You wouldn't let someone come and be like, oh, I'll only come in your pool if you adjust the temperature for me. Or I don't like the hardscape like that. Like you should put a waterfall over there. Hell no. You're only going to let people come into your pool that are in alignment with your vision, that support you, elevate you, empower you, right? And that comes with having clarity around what your goals are and then approaching them with $1 million business confidence.
You mean to tell me that I have to tell some potential customers no? I can't be everything to everyone? What?
I know,
I gotta
right?
choose. But that's
Yes.
hard. That's extremely difficult. That's extremely, extremely difficult. So then what are some of the elements of that? Let's say if we have to speak in a fashion like Nassim Taleb would I'm going to give him a name drop, although he doesn't need it, but the author of Anti-Fragile and his notion of via negativa. So through negation. So what does not having $1 million confidence look like? Is there something where you can see it? Hey, this person, they're in lack. Here's evidence. Let's point to that. Maybe it's limiting beliefs. Maybe it's something like that. So that listeners can ask themselves, okay, do I really have $1 million confidence or not?
Yeah. Well, number one, they'll know. They'll tell you I do or I don't. But the way that it would manifest, tangibly, right, would be things like this. I have patients who regularly show up late for appointments. I regularly offer extra discounts because somebody can't afford XYZ. I make exceptions to the rules because of blah, 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 right? So it's sort of where your boundaries are not clear or maybe they're clear for you, but you're not holding your patients or yourself accountable to them, right? So your employees are chewing gum or sitting on their phone, and it's in your policy book that you don't want your receptionist sitting at the front desk, scrolling her Instagram, but you sort of let it go because it's like, yeah, it's irritating, but it's not like really impacting things. that's how you start to see it manifest. And I think I love what you say about, negation. Like, I think exclusivity is a really beautiful business strategy and brand strategy, right? You mentioned Tony Robbins. If you follow Tony Robbins, he talks about the basic human needs, right? There's 6 basic human needs. Like, we all want different things. We have different desires, but there are like needs that we have. And one of them is significance. We have a need for significance and inclusion, right? And we want to feel special. And most of the time we think, oh, I'll help my patient feel special, right? This is sort of like our clients will say, well, I'm going to help them feel special by giving them the, access to text me on the weekend, or I'll come in extra hours for them, or right. Yeah. And they think that's how they're making their patient feel special. When in fact, the way that a patient's going to feel special is by having special perks or access to things that other people can't. And so that comes with exclusivity, which comes by setting firm boundaries around your ecosystem, around what you're willing to put up with, around the client, the type of client that you accept in your practice. But if you don't know who that client, if you don't know who you are, you're going to have a hard time identifying and articulating that through your brand strategy to those clients, right? And so it starts sort of with you. And that's why that mindset piece is so important. But did that answer your question?
Yeah, I think so. And maybe we'll get into some tactical ways to develop that confidence in a moment. But I think if I'm hearing you correctly, it's something like this. If we were to distill it down into a 1-sentence summary, let's see if I can do this in a sentence, probably not. Something like, know your values and do not deviate from them.
Love it.
And so if someone, for example, one of my values as a leader of the sales team at Artemis is if someone's late to a meeting, I give them a few minutes and then I jet. If I get a text saying, hey, can you talk to me in an hour? No, I can't. And it's not because I'm being mean. It's just, no, I literally cannot. Mm-hmm. And if I were to deviate from that value that I have, which is that I'm always punctual, as best I can be, of course things come up. But if my expectation is that those that I work with are to be punctual and they deviate from that and they lift a flag, a pattern of that behavior, I'm sorry, I literally can't work with you. It's a value of mine. And for me to infringe on that would be for me to be incongruent with who I am. And that paradoxically would make me less interesting to work with because, oh yeah, he says one thing, but he does another thing entirely. Something like that. So know your values, I think is the takeaway.
Exactly. Well, and think about it, just like you with your sales team, right? They're a reflection of their leader. Your patients and they're a reflection of the boundaries that you put in place and those restrictions almost that you put up, like the barriers around yourself. And what I see, especially working with women, is that we tend to want to be everything to everybody. We want to be well liked. It's hard to say no. It's hard to and so we sort of we'll go until we burn ourselves out. And then guess what? We can't show up on the rested edge for our team. We can't be calm, confident, and clear every day for our patients, and we can't give them our best selves. And so it's up to us as leaders, right? It's up to us individually to ask ourselves this important question: what are my core values? What is important to me? What sort of nest do I need to build so that I feel protected and safe in my ecosystem and that nobody can infringe upon that? That way I show up like this beautiful butterfly or bird or whatever analogy you want to use, right? That is there to give my patients who I respect and value my very best self, right? And I love what you say about people wanting, I think we underestimate how we show up on brand every day by the way we do business. We're setting examples by the things we do and the actions we take, not just the words that we say.
100%. And speaking of percentages, I think a quick mention of Pareto, then we'll move on here, is relevant. 20, 80, 80, 20, 80, 20. There's an 80-20 in every 80-20. And along those lines, if you can do the heavy lifting, the work up front that we're about to talk about here in a moment of really architecting what your brand strategy is, and don't worry, we'll define what that means here in a moment, and category creation, et cetera, that's going to allow you the space to be laser focused on identifying who you serve, how you serve them, when you serve them, and with what do you serve them, et cetera, so that you can, on the other side of the input of serving the 20%, you get the 80% of all the outcomes that you're after: revenue growth, scaling up, customer patient satisfaction, blah, 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 everything else. But if you don't have that, in fact, I was just on a call with a gal before we started the show, and she was just drowning in an ocean of obscurity because there's all this noise. She's in an ocean of other estheticians and salon suites. And she's like, I don't know how to break through the noise. Well, listeners, if that's you, we're going to tell you how to do that here in just a moment. So let's actually shift gears along those lines and start getting into brand strategy. And actually, before I do that, quick shout out. I was going to spend a bit of time talking about your book, The Habits of Seven-Figure MDs, but because Kaeli is an absolute rock star, she has that on her website that you can go download for free today as a starting point as you start learning more about her. And I would strongly encourage you to do that. And a quick mention of the site name, or the URL, and do correct me if I'm wrong, Kaeli, but klcconsultants.com is where you can go to get that ebook. I just downloaded it this morning. It's great. Do read it. Can't recommend it enough.
Awesome.
All right. Yeah. So brand strategy. Let's change gears and spend the rest of our time in that pool today. Speaking of pools, and I think we'll have a lot of substance here. Let's say,
yeah.
This is a bit of a two-part question that I think requires a bit of setup. So from what I can gather on your IP, your content online, the way you view a brand and what it encompasses is effectively threefold. So number one is market perception, so how they view you. Two, your specialization. And then lastly, your reputation. So I want to mention one other bit first before I get into the actual question here. But as I hear and read about your view of brand strategy, advanced brand strategy, et cetera, I can't help resist the inclination of picking up the book Play Bigger. Now, I'm sure you've seen this, read this, heard about it, but it's largely related and oriented on category creation. So here's a few quotes from that book, and then I'll get to the actual questions here from you, or for you rather. So number one from that book, category design is the discipline of creating and developing a new market category and conditioning the market so that it will demand your solution and crown your company as the king or queen. The company that defines the space is best positioned to dominate it. So that's all the preamble. That's all the setup. So how do you define brand strategy first as a starting point? And then do you see any overlap between that and this notion of category creation?
Mm-hmm. Wow. Really good question. Yeah. I work really specifically with a certain type of client, in the aesthetic and wellness space. And so very commonly, because typical medical practice models have been built a certain way and constructed looking a certain way for a long time. And there's been this evolution of patient care, doctor, medicine bag, stethoscope, your typical, I'm going to the doctor. Those are the same people who are now building multi-million-dollar enterprises, and they have patients that are willing to pay cash. And I know you have clients in all of different specialties, right, Austin?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
And you can sort of look at this model and how there's this disjointed sort of thing going on in terms of brand evolution and as you're talking about category creation, because there's this model that a lot of these doctors have seen and they want to emulate, and yet the patient, the consumer today in aesthetic and wellness is looking for a place to go to have an experience. They are looking for a place to go to feel better, look better, to feel better, to feel significant, right? They have these sort of needs that need to be met. And so there's this interesting, and it's sort of like this disjointed point here. And I think that's where, this perception, specialization, reputation you mentioned, all of these things are how you really can look at what's not working. Where are you? What do your patients want? Looking at sort of taking influence even from other industries, and what is what do people want from a solution standpoint, and then bringing that into that medical practice, right? And so there's, for example, clients that we have who they have a beauty. We have a client that her business called the Beauty Bus, and she drives around in an Airstream, and it's just out of the box thinking, right?
Yeah,
and I
that's
talked
cool.
to a dermatologist the other day who's like, I want to have my patients not standing at a desk when they walk in. I want them to be able to sit in swinging chairs from the ceiling. Or we have another client who has a retail shop and does tequila tastings in the back, right? It's like business can be done differently. And I think that I'm sort of getting a little bit off track from your question, but I think when you're thinking about designing a new category, it doesn't mean that I'm not a doctor anymore, or I'm not practicing medicine in a certain way. It's sort of just opening up your creative juices to approach the experience that the patient is going to have from their viewpoint, from their perspective.
Sounds like a call to be empathetic or develop high acuity for EQ, which I think is largely ignored because we're so preoccupied with spreadsheets, P&L statements, this, that, and the other, and we miss and lose sight of that key bit, which is putting yourself in the seat of the person in your seat and understanding that. So how do you, let's say I'm a practice owner and, I just graduated med school. I'm an aesthetics practice owner. I'm just getting on my feet, and I know I need to get at brand strategy and start thinking about how to even develop that and architect that. Where do you start? How do you even unpack the first box of shoes to take the first step in?
Yeah. The first step is just thinking about who you want to be, I think it's sort of this really beautiful synergy between what I'm excellent at and what I love doing. And thinking to yourself and really articulating, I teach journaling. I journal, and I have our clients, like when we work together, we talk about, here's some journal prompts to think about, and really designing what your vision is. Who is it that you want to attract? Who do you want to work with? I don't know, like sometimes we'll have clients and they'll be like, oh, that patient's coming in, or, oh, I have to do that. Or I don't, and you as a business owner get to choose who you work with and who you allow to come into your ecosystem. So the first step, when you want to build a brand, is deciding who you want to be. So some examples, like the Dollar Tree, right? They decided that they wanted to sell everything for $1, right? So they're not going to go market to somebody that wants luxury products, right? Then you have Rolex, right? Rolex is a market leader. The perception of them is just, the high luxury brand quality, right? And so it's sort of, and there's in the middle. And I think that it's deciding where you fit into which category and how you want to position yourself, and then making those decisions around how you market yourself, the copy that you write, your content, the experience that the patient has when they call your office, what it looks like when they walk in. All of that is reflective of how you decide to position yourself, and that's going to impact your pricing, all of the things that are related to building your business.
Yeah, I think the idea that was promulgated by Charlie Munger, Buffett's partner at Berkshire Hathaway, and I'm going to completely sabotage the quote, and this is a paraphrase at best, but it's something like this: that it is easier to navigate life by figuring out what to not do. Like, hey, don't pick up a rattlesnake when you're hiking because it'll bite you and you'll die. Like, that's an easy thing to implement, to not do, so that you can have a better quality of life. And so as I'm thinking about where the challenges might be for the practice owner, thinking, well, okay, I need a strategy. I don't have one. I'm a doctor. I do, injectables and other aesthetic services and treatments, but I don't have time to think about this brand strategy stuff. It's too complicated. I'm out. I'm just going to continue serving my patients and customers well. So it's overwhelming is the point. And I think as a way, and maybe speak to this if you disagree or do agree, that a good starting point or a vector to do this in such a way that it's not so overwhelming, this whole project of choice and the architecture of your strategy for your brand and its development, is to figure out things like who you don't want to serve, or what your values are that would necessarily exclude certain type of patients or otherwise. Is there some merit to that idea of, to delineate, or rather make it such that you're not setting yourself up for this paralysis analysis, paradox of choice, where there's so many options? Just flip it, start in the other direction. I mean, is that a reasonable strategy to get started, or is there maybe a different way that you would suggest?
So I think, like, if you know who you're for, I ask myself that question: who am I for and who am I not for? If you go to the info page to learn about our academy, it clearly lays it out that way. Like, this is, you're a fit if, and you're not a fit if, right? And so I think that automatically eliminates the people who are not going to, be a pleasure to work with and appreciate your brilliance and your talent, right? But I think, maybe it's a good time to circle back to that 80-20 principle too, and as let's say you're an established business like a Lisa Parisi, right? Who's like, I've done things really well up to this point, and I want to take it to the next level. I want to elevate. The first thing we do is we look at the business that she has, right? And we go through an exercise of identifying who her most valuable consumer is, who is the most valuable patient, what are they like, and start to see, first of all, like, literally who spends the most money. Automatically, you might think it's that one person that's going to come in for the highest ticket procedure, right? Or like cut the biggest check for you that one time. But as you start to look at the trends, and maybe that patient who is coming in more frequently, who's maybe on a subscription model, maybe somebody who is very well connected and referring other patients and helping you with this organic growth. So it's sort of looking at the business that you have, and then really to that specific 20% who are going to be responsible for 80% of your results. And then you build really your content strategy, everything that you do around marketing to that specific patient or consumer.
Yeah. I think it might also be helpful to be thinking about what is missing. So, for example, you use the example of one of your clients. I think you said that thought, wouldn't it be great if we had swings instead of seats or whatever in the practice? And so maybe a part of the project, if you want to keep it high level and avoid getting really granular, and I would love to hear your thoughts on the necessity of granularity, meaning, selecting things like, well, hey, this is our font. We use Roboto, we use Arial, and the size is this, and the color is this, and the brand voice and the brand tone and the emotion that we're trying to elicit, et cetera. Those are very, very granular things that may or may not have a place. But I think for those starting out, trying to just carve out a strategy, ask what's missing. So maybe it's, hey, I wish there were GQ magazines in the table of my waiting room versus Cosmo Girl, whatever it is. And then that can help, I think, in their architecture of their brand. But to the point about the granularity bit though, is there a point at which you get so consumed in writing out your brand book, let's call it, where you have everything codified, all the bits that I mentioned, where there's diminishing returns? Is there an 80-20 of that maybe in terms of how far you go in the architecting of your brand strategy?
Look, to me, this is everything. Like, if you look at your business as what do you call it? You've seen like the meme of like, it's the peak. What's that thing called? Where the tip is the iceberg, right? The 10% is
right.
sticking out, and there's the 90% on the bottom, right? This 10%, that's the graphic design. That's the actual visual representation of your brand. The rest is your brand positioning. And that is setting strategy. And that's why I'm not a graphic designer. I'm not trying to be a graphic designer. I can recommend, somebody that can blow away. But too often we think that our brand is the color palette that we put together, or our fonts, right? Or all of this mood board or whatnot. If you go to a brand designer, if you ask them to build you a brand, but you haven't done the work on how you're positioning yourself in the marketplace, then you're wasting your time. And so, it's like, peel this back like many layers. And I think what's important about what you said is identifying a gap in the market. And it doesn't have to be a gap in, there aren't magazines or there isn't something hanging in my office, right? It could be a gap in a philosophy. I go back to Lisa Parisi again, right? For her, what I love about what she's done is most practitioners do it the other way. They are taught, they get the education, like the book academics, first, and then they go and do it that way. And then they're like, oh, I have this itch, like something's not right, right? She came in she was bartending and she was like, wait, this is real life. And I'm going to, invest all of my time and energy and learning the practicality of how this approach works with patients. What actually happens to them? Why is this happening this way? She asked that question. And so the way that she's going to build the experience that patients are going to have, hopefully she doesn't mind me using this term, but like, she calls it typical whack and crack, right? Like your chiropractors who are just not approaching the patient from this holistic perspective. I hung on that because I thought that was so funny. I have other chiropractic friends I've used it with now too, but right, like that was the gap for her. And so it's simply, she can say, I'm not going to be that. I'm going to position myself in, for this person who is not for that. Right. And it feels polarizing sometimes, right? Like to not work with everybody, but the more focused you are in every aspect of your business, the better job you can do going deep with the patients that you have, right? Versus trying to be everything to everybody. You can put all that energy, all that talent, all that time into becoming excellent at that one thing. And so I'm not saying you have to be, some specific specialist that only does one thing, but maybe you specialize in an approach. Maybe you specialize in something that is intangible, and that's just as valuable or more valuable than the tangible things.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think about why I go to my favorite coffee shop, and it is the most stupid reason conceivable. They have one chair that is just mesmerizing to sit in, and the coffee shop's a coffee shop. I mean, of course, there's different subtleties, but that one little differentiator has led to my spending hundreds, probably a month, if not thousands, I don't know, thousands, but hundreds of dollars a month there because of one chair. Now, if they took the time to think about their lighting, the way their employees interact with me, are they fun? Are they drab? Are they serious? Are they funny? Are they this? Are they that? So I think there's a lot of merit to taking the time up front to do the heavy lifting, to think these things through, maybe avoid getting super granular, at least initially, so as to avoid paralysis, which is inevitable as a byproduct of having too many options of things to think through, and that, I think, is made manifest when you find yourself, maybe this is the moment you've done it, is when someone calls you and says, Kaeli, hey, I own a chiropractic clinic, as an example here, and I want to work with you. And Kaeli says, well, great, do you this, that, and the other? And they say no. And Kaeli says, well, I'm sorry, I can't work with you because you've been excluded. And it's not because we're being mean or anything of the sort. It's actually paradoxically benevolent, because if you're not the right person for that person, A, you're not going to be able to deliver the outcomes that they're after. And then B, if they do end up becoming toxic because of differences of whatever, now you're not serving your actual base, your 20%, as well as you could. So it's a very, very important thing to take seriously and spend the time measuring twice up front or three times.
Yeah, but I also think you can, it's not like a guessing game, I mean, like with Lisa as an example, we're asking her clients, we're doing focus groups, we're doing research. Like imagine if that coffee shop sent you a little note and was like, hey, coffee's on, we'd love to hear what you love about us. Next coffee on us. And you were like, I love that chair. What could we do better? If there was some music, right? If the ambiance or the whatever, or how was your last experience with someone on our team? And so you're learning about yourself through the lens of your consumer. And, that's sort of the thing. And I think that to your point about setting boundaries or eliminating people or who's right or whatnot, like I know there's certain things that there's certain characteristics, there's certain philosophies and the way and a level of commitment that you need to have when you come in to work in our academy, like for you to be successful, for you to achieve mind-blowing results for yourself, there's certain things that need to be put in place. And so it's just a service to, the person that wants to invest their money with you, you're going to just be upfront and set those And that comes with the confidence, right? That's like, I feel confident enough to not be hungry for the dollar, but hungry to accomplish my mission. And in order for me to do this, this is what it's going to take to get there.
Yeah. And by the way, habit number 2 in her book, and again, the title is the habits of 7-figure MDs. Habit number 2 is extremely relevant here. So go get that book again, and you'll quickly understand what I mean. Well, we have 13 minutes. I wish we had more time. I want to touch on disruption briefly, if only briefly. I think it deserves a bit of setup here. So here's a setup for the question before we get into that. So I think every business owner, aesthetics or otherwise, would die to have a 6x improvement in revenue, profit, whatever metric and KPI that you're looking at. And there's a mantra that you have on your website that resonates like a bell in a cathedral in Vienna, which is this: disrupt or be disrupted. And maybe a different way of saying it, to make it a bit more high stakes, is differentiate or die. And I don't know, those are my words, not Kaelis, to be clear. But how do you see this necessity of being disruptive, and ideally, furthermore, intentionally disruptive, because this is language that you use, which I'm assuming is intentional, of course. But how do you see disruption and its relation to brand strategy overall? And I'm assuming this has some pertinence to the secret, let's say, of standing out in a crowd and becoming the signal, the one that people demand, or the category king or queen.
Right.
So any relationship between this disruption and brand strategy? How do you think about that?
Right. So I think everybody can have their own relationship with how they view disruption or what disruption means for them. And I think what I want to do is help people shift their mind around disruption actually being positive. And this came up a lot during COVID, because I think people felt like they were being disrupted, right? Like my doors are closed. I don't know what to do. I have to pivot, right? My employees, I furloughed them, and now they're getting stimulus checks and they don't want to come back to work, right?
Right.
There's a lot going on that people are like, oh, this is not fun, right? But it's the adversity, it's the things that sort of shake us up a little bit, right? That make us have to take a step back and think and use our minds and be creative and stop going through the freaking motions every day, right? And I think to the point of why disrupt, why would you want to be disruptive? You want to become the obvious choice for your clients. One of those questions when someone calls me and we're talking about, are you the right fit for our academy? A question sometimes comes up that says, or a comment that, when I started my business, there wasn't a lot of competition, but now there's a med spa in every single corner. And, or they'll ask me, but if I come into your academy, are you going to work with somebody else within a certain radius? And to me, that is like a telltale sign that you don't understand who you are and how you should and could and will be the obvious choice for your clients. If you are asking a question about your competition, you need to do work on your brand strategy, right? And so what that may mean is like, I specialize in acne, right? Okay, acne for who? How are you approaching acne? What's the experience the patient's going to have? Why? And I would encourage any of you who are listening to this, right? For your listeners, ask yourself this question. Why would a consumer choose me over my competition, or flip that around? Why would they choose my competition over me? And put that journal prompt down and ask that. And so it's sort of like, sometimes it's a matter of disrupting yourself. It's getting out of your rhythmic state of this model that's being built, to stop living in status quo, do things differently, be innovative, leverage your ingenuity, and bring people onto your team who can help you accomplish that goal, so that your consumers feel like they're a part of something special, and that you become a category of one and the obvious choice for them.
Yeah. I don't know if this is a aphorism, the wrong term, something like this. seems to be a tune many are singing today, especially during COVID, which is that things are happening to me.
Right.
Okay, great. Well, why don't you happen to things?
Right.
And get away from, I don't want to say a victim mentality. It's more of a scarcity mindset in my eyes than having true abundance and fearlessness to actually change gears and disrupt. And it starts with yourself. Now, if you want a trick to disrupt yourself in your own thinking, I don't know, get in an ice bath, and that'll that'll shake you to your core and shift your thinking gears a bit, at least in theory. So
yeah, and I heard, I'll just jump in because I heard this amazing podcast. So Ed Milet interviewed Dabo Sweeney, who is the head coach of Clemson football. And I have done like case study stuff on Alabama football. And I love talking about coaches because there's just building teams and legacies and programs, to me, there's so much continuity and similarities between building businesses that last and become your legacy, right? And obviously I teach on leadership. But Dabo Sweeney talked about he said, when you walk into our locker room, right, there is a big billboard, like, right, that you look at. I might be botching a little bit of where it is or what specifically, but he said there's a picture of, it's like you're sitting in a car and you have the rear view mirror and then you have the windshield. And there's a reason the rear view mirror is this big and the windshield is this big, right? If you're busy looking in the rear view mirror, you're going to crash going forward. Right? Don't stop focusing on the rear view. The past is the past. And it's the same thing. Like, some people need to burn up their business because it's just not friggin' working. And I hate to say that, but the reality is there's some things that you're trying to make all these adjustments and plug holes and fix things to build around the one thing that's not working. Maybe an employee that you've had forever, and just because they've been with you forever, but they're toxic to the culture, right? Sometimes we have to just look at today as a fresh start and what the opportunity for us to show up in our marketplace as somebody who is new and fresh and innovative. And I think that it starts by focusing on the opportunity ahead in that windshield, not focusing on the rearview mirror.
100%, 100%, which is a beautiful segue to our exit here. And it's this. So listeners, remember at the start of this show, Kaeli mentioned her mission, which is that she wants to help 100 intentional and inspiring women in aesthetics cross the next $1 million mark in their business this year. And I have a suspicion she can help you do it. Now, listeners, if you want to do one of the 100 this year that she helps do that, you need to connect with her. So Kaeli, how do our listeners connect with you to see if there's something material in terms of working with you?
Yeah, thank you. So if you go to my link, klcconsultants.com/join, you can actually download my ebook there. You can get a bunch of free resources and you can subscribe to my list to get access to my emails. I'm sending tips out every week. But also go head over, if you're a podcast listener, check out the Fierce Factor podcast. I'm teaching tactic and mindset stuff. And there may be some stuff there that will resonate with you around leadership, building your brand, and building your team.
Awesome. Yeah. Check her out on YouTube too. She's got quite a few videos on her KLC Consulting as well, and they're all fabulous. So do connect with her. She is amazing. And she is all over. Well, awesome. Well, Kaeli, thank you for stopping by. I've enjoyed our time today, and we'll talk later on.
Thanks for having me, Austin. Take care.
Awesome. Bye-bye.
Bye.